Welcome to our deep dive, everyone. Today we're going to be looking at traditions.
Traditions.
Yeah, you gave me like a really interesting mix of sources this time around. Like academic articles, personal reflections.
Yeah.
Even some like historical accounts. It's a lot to dig through.
It is a lot, and I think it really speaks to just how kind of ingrained traditions are in like all aspects of human life.
Right.
And that was sort of what I was hoping to convey with all of those sources was that...
Well, you did a good job because I was intimidated when I first saw it. I'm like, oh boy, this is a lot.
Yeah.
But then I started reading through it and I was hooked.
Okay, good.
There was this one anecdote that really like got me in, and I think it was about the Inuit tribes.
Oh, yeah.
Up in the Arctic, and like their traditions around whale hunting
Mm-hmm.
and how they would like predict the migration patterns of whales. It was fascinating.
Yeah, and it really, it speaks to the point of how these traditions often developed out of necessity.
Totally, like life or death.
Exactly, like miscalculating when the whales were going to arrive could mean starvation for the entire community.
Yeah, I never really thought about it like that before, but it makes sense. Traditions were survival.
Right, like this accumulated knowledge that gets passed down through generations.
Like a living manual for navigating the world.
Exactly, and, even something as simple as like a family recipe that's been passed down that could have vital information about like food preservation techniques or local ingredients that, work best in that region.
So we've got traditions essential for survival, but it seems like there's this whole other side to it.
Right.
They weren't just practical. They were also about like shaping communities and explaining the unknown.
Absolutely. Think about ancient myths, for example.
Okay.
Like Greek myths, they were trying to provide explanations for everything.
Right.
Like the creation of the universe, the changing seasons, natural disasters. It was humanity's way of like making sense of a world that was often very unpredictable and kind of scary.
It's like storytelling to fill in the gaps.
Yeah, exactly. And those stories, those traditions, they gave people a sense of control, a sense of understanding in a world that they didn't fully comprehend.
Right.
But it wasn't just about explaining the cosmos or the natural world,
Right.
Traditions also played a crucial role in establishing social order-defining roles within a community.
Okay.
Like the sources talk about tribal dances.
Yeah.
Those weren't just for entertainment. Those often reinforced social hierarchies, taught young people their place in society.
Wow. I never thought of it like that.
It strengthened bonds between members of the tribe, so
traditions were like this invisible glue holding communities together.
I like that analogy, yeah. It's like this invisible glue, and, we see this even today, that need for connection and belonging, like family dinners, holiday gatherings, even those like quirky little rituals we have with our friends. Those all contribute to that sense of belonging and stability that we as humans crave.
It makes me think about like, why are some traditions so resistant to change?
Oh, that's a good question.
Even when they seem, outdated.
It's a great question, and I think it's something that I've always kind of pondered myself, and I think part of it comes down to just the deep emotional and cultural significance that these traditions hold for people.
Okay.
Think of it like the traditions are like threads woven into the fabric of our identities.
Okay.
Changing them can feel like unraveling who we are.
It's more than just habit. It's really tied to our sense of self.
Exactly. And then on top of that, you have the social pressure.
Right.
Imagine growing up in a family where every Sunday, without fail,
every Sunday,
you have this big roast dinner.
Right.
You might not be a huge fan of roast, but, suddenly deciding to skip it could feel like you're rejecting your family's entire history and their values.
It's like that old saying, if it ain't broke,
don't fix it.
Don't fix it. But sometimes traditions do need a little fixing.
They do, and that's where things get really interesting and also a bit tricky.
Yeah, that's a good point. We should probably talk about that.
We should.
Let's dive into that.
Yeah, let's do it.
So we were talking about traditions that need fixing.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about some of the sources that talk about like harmful traditions, like outdated gender roles,
right,
or even some cultural practices that could be considered like cruel or discriminatory.
Yeah. It's a really important point. Not all traditions are created equal.
Right.
And some can have some very real negative consequences.
It's true.
It raises this really complex question of how do we balance respect for the past with the need for progress and social justice?
It's tricky.
It is tricky.
Like I was reading about those coming-of-age rituals in certain cultures.
Oh, yeah.
Some of which can be pretty intense.
Yeah, anthropologists have been studying those rituals for decades, trying to understand their purpose and their impact.
Yeah?
Some argue that they're essential for building resilience and social cohesion, while others see them as outdated and potentially harmful.
It makes you wonder how those traditions started in the first place,
right,
and why they've persisted for so long.
Often, I think they served a purpose in their original context. For instance, in societies with limited access to formal education, a challenging initiation rite might have been the primary way to prepare young people for the responsibilities of adulthood.
It's like a crash course in survival skills.
Exactly.
And social norms all rolled into one.
Exactly. But as societies evolve, some of these rituals can become detached from their original purpose.
Right.
And can even take on harmful aspects.
So how do we decide which traditions are worth preserving?
Right.
And which ones need to be, like, challenged or even abandoned?
It's a tough question, and I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer.
Right.
But I think open and honest dialogue is a good place to start.
Okay.
Approaching these conversations with respect and empathy.
Yeah.
Recognizing that traditions do hold deep meaning for people.
But how do you tell someone that a tradition they hold dear might actually be causing harm?
It's so tough. It really feels like walking on eggshells sometimes. But I think it's less about telling people they're wrong.
Okay.
And more about asking questions and fostering understanding. So instead of saying this tradition is outdated and needs to go, we could ask, what's the meaning behind this tradition?
Right.
And are there ways that we can adapt it to reflect our values today?
I like that.
Yeah.
You know, as you're saying that, it reminds me of something I read in the sources about arranged marriages.
Oh, yeah.
And how in some cultures it's becoming less about parental control and more about finding a compatible partner within a shared cultural framework.
Yeah, that's a great example of how traditions can evolve and adapt.
Right.
Like the core concept remains finding a life partner.
Yeah.
But the approach has shifted to reflect changing social norms.
So it's like remixing tradition.
I like that.
Keeping the melody, but changing the arrangement.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of remixing, the source material had a whole section on New Year's celebrations around the world.
Oh, yeah.
It was fascinating to see how different cultures mark this transition into a new year.
Yeah, it's a testament to the diversity of human culture.
It is.
And, the different ways that we make sense of time and renewal.
It made me wonder, though.
What's that?
Could we ever have, like, a single global New Year's celebration?
Ooh.
Like one giant party for everyone on Earth.
That's a fun thought experiment. Imagine the fireworks displays.
Right. But then I was like, wait a minute. The logistics trying to coordinate a celebration across all those time zones would be a nightmare.
A total nightmare.
And not to mention, like, the potential cultural clashes.
Oh, yeah. What food do we serve? What music do we play?
Whose traditions get to take center stage?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's a recipe for disaster.
And wouldn't it kind of diminish the unique beauty of each culture's individual celebration?
I think so. I think sometimes it's better to appreciate the kaleidoscope of traditions rather than trying to blend them all into one homogeneous mix.
Okay, so enough about New Year's. I want to touch on something else that jumped out at me from the source material. And that's how so many traditions are centered around celebrating human relationships.
Oh, yeah.
We've got birthdays, weddings, Mother's Day, Father's Day.
Right.
The list goes on and on.
It does. And these traditions aren't just about marking time. They're about reinforcing the bonds of family and community.
Yeah.
Think about the rituals associated with a wedding, for instance.
Okay.
The exchange of rings, the vows, the celebratory feast, they all serve to symbolize and solidify that commitment between two people.
It's true.
Yeah.
I've always loved that tradition of parents walking their child down the aisle.
Oh, yeah.
It's such a visual representation of letting go and welcoming a new person into the family.
It's beautiful, and it speaks to the power of traditions to convey emotions and values without even needing words.
It's true. It makes you realize that these seemingly small rituals can actually have a really profound impact on how we understand our place in the world and how we connect with others.
Absolutely. They provide a framework for expressing love, gratitude, respect.
Think about the simple act of giving a gift on someone's birthday.
Okay.
It's a way of saying, I value you, and I'm happy you're in my life.
It's a tangible expression of those intangible feelings.
Exactly.
But, as we're talking about all these heartwarming traditions, it occurs to me that technology is changing how we experience and even create traditions.
Oh, absolutely. It's impossible to ignore the impact of the digital age on the way we connect and celebrate.
Just think about how social media has transformed everything.
Oh, yeah.
From birthday greetings to holiday gatherings.
That's true.
We're constantly sharing our traditions online. And in some ways creating new ones in the process. I mean, it's kind of wild to think that, like, a Facebook post could be considered a tradition, but I guess when you do it every year for, like, 10 years, it becomes part of how your family celebrates.
It totally does. And it's not just limited to social media either.
Yeah.
Think about all those, like, online communities that have sprung up around shared interests.
Oh, yeah. Like, you have these communities for people who love to knit or people who are really into, like, a specific video game. And they often develop their own unique rituals and ways of interacting, like almost a kind of digital kinship.
I like that digital kinship because it really is like you're forming these bonds online that are rooted in shared interests.
Exactly. And it really speaks to that human need for connection.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether it's happening in person or online.
Right. It's like that need transcends the physical world.
Totally. And it shows how adaptable traditions are. Like, they're not static.
Okay.
They're not frozen in time.
Yeah.
It's a living, breathing thing that evolves with us.
So if traditions can evolve and even emerge in this digital age, does that mean we can consciously create new ones?
Ooh.
Like, can we just decide, hey, we're starting a new tradition?
It's a really interesting question. And you know what? The sources actually talk about this.
They do.
The idea of intentional tradition creation. And they suggest it's absolutely possible and maybe even essential in a world that's changing so rapidly.
So how do you even go about creating a new tradition?
Right.
Because I feel like it needs that, like, weight of history behind it.
Yeah.
To, like, really feel meaningful.
I think the key is intentionality. Like, consciously choosing those rituals or practices that reflect your values, your aspirations, and then committing to repeating them over time.
So it's about, like, weaving meaning into the fabric of your life.
Exactly.
But what about that historical aspect? Like, how do you create something that feels timeless when you're starting from scratch?
I think the beauty of creating new traditions is that you're not bound by the past.
Okay.
You have the freedom to draw inspiration from all sorts of sources, your cultural heritage, your personal beliefs, even your hopes for the future.
Right.
It's about creating something that resonates with you and the people you care about.
So it's less about mimicking the past and more about creating something authentic to who we are now.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe the traditions we create today will become the cherished rituals of future generations.
I like that it makes it feel really powerful.
Yeah.
Like, we have this responsibility to shape the traditions that'll define our future.
I think so.
I mean, it's like all those new traditions emerging around environmental awareness.
Oh, yeah.
Like planting trees on birthdays or having meatless Mondays.
I love those examples.
It's like we're creating rituals to help us navigate the challenges of our time.
Yeah.
And imagine a better future.
It's like we're taking action and making it part of our everyday lives.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about the big picture.
Yeah.
Like the societal and cultural impact of traditions. But what about on a personal level?
Oh, that's a great point to bring it back to.
Yeah.
I think traditions provide a sense of continuity and stability in a world that's constantly changing.
That's true.
Like, they anchor us to something larger than ourselves, connecting us to the past, present, and future.
Like, my family has this tradition of reading bedtime stories every night. It's something I did as a child, and now I do it with my own kids.
I love that.
It's so simple, but it creates this beautiful connection across generations.
It's those small, everyday rituals that often have the most profound impact on our lives.
I think so, too.
They create a sense of rhythm and predictability.
Right.
Which can be so comforting, especially in times of stress or uncertainty.
It's like those little rituals are these pockets of peace.
Yeah.
In the chaos of life.
Yeah.
You know, as we're wrapping up this deep dive, I'm realizing that traditions are so much more than just like quaint customs or dusty rituals. They're really powerful forces that shape our identities, our communities.
Absolutely.
And even our understanding of the world.
I couldn't agree more. They really are a testament to human creativity, resilience, and that deep need for connection.
And like we talked about, they're not static.
Right.
They're constantly evolving, adapting, even being reinvented.
Yeah.
To meet the needs of each generation. So as we wrap up, what's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to walk away with?
I think it's this: traditions are a gift from the past, but they're also a bridge to the future.
I like that.
And it's up to each of us to decide which traditions we want to carry forward, which ones we need to reimagine, and what new rituals we want to create to shape the world we want to live in.
That's beautifully said. And on that note, we want to thank you, dear listener.
Yes.
For joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of traditions.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you enjoyed the journey and maybe even feel inspired to examine your own traditions with fresh eyes.
Absolutely.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those traditions alive.
This is DigitView.